Yes, welcome to the No State Project. It's a little, I told you, I warned about this. I know it's a little unusual. That's why we need people to be subbed. But we are live here from the fortified compound. It is October 26th. And so there won't be a live show tomorrow. But hey, if you don't get to hear the stream, then when you hear the LRN stream, it'll be all new material. At least that's what we're hoping is going to happen, that everything will work out, unlike the last time we tried to do this. But I know we did miss people. We always do. We get a lot of calls here on the big show. If you want to join me, the number is 218-632-9399. Passcode, of course, is 2020 with the # or the hashtag, and that gets you into the queue, so to speak. Yeah, we got everybody starting to log on now. We've actually got a tiny audience, but that's it. We just started. It is unusual. I will be in California for the weekend. Wonderful downtown San Bernardino, California. Nonetheless, we have to do the show today. That's what, I made the announcements for that. So glad I can be here from the fortified compound. I say fortified compound because in the media, which we're going to talk about also today, when it comes to people who question, especially legitimately questioning government, you have to do what you can to make us look like the heretics that we are, that there's something wrong with us. Oh, no, he's actually an anarchist, not some undercover cop. He actually, so they describe us as not living in houses and having a basement. No, it's a fortified compound with an underground bunker, or bunker, because it was New Hampshire that we heard that. So, yeah, that's why I say that. Okay, so we're going to have almost 2 hours of Anarchy Radio right here on Friday. And by anarchy, I mean no rulers. I know there's been wordsmithing, but when I use the word, most of us use the word, as far as describing yourself as an anarchist, it is no rulers. That it's wrong to lie, steal, kill, and cheat out of people just because you call yourself a government. I'll get into all that stuff. But we've got to have some good stuff here on the big show. And I mentioned this before I started talking about it. I said that I'd spend a lot more time on it here. Now, I know a lot of people say, well, what's the big deal? But, music is subjective. And the way music hits you, whether it hits you or it doesn't, whether there's an emotional connection, you feel that's entirely a personal thing. I mean, for me, I can't listen to rap and hip hop. It does nothing for me. It's just more of an irritant. Not to put it down as an art form. It doesn't do anything for me. Country music, especially the last 15, 20 years, is repellent to me. I can't listen to it. Now, Marty Robbins, I can listen to some Marty Robbins. So it's so great that in Breaking Bad, the last episode, they used a Marty Robbins song. But for me, my favorite, all-time favorite, if I had one genre of music that I had to listen, I could only listen to one, it would be the blues. And this is why I'm going to be talking now about a birthday that's coming up on the 29th. He will be, he'll be 72. The one and only Peter Allen Greenbaum, also known as Peter Green. And I can't say enough about it. I know not everybody is as fanatical about Peter Green as I am, but I put Peter Green in the same category as Mike Bloomfield. Oh, good Lord, Mike Bloomfield. Dwayne Skydog Allman. Oy vey. Not too many in that circle. Still a lot of guitar players that I really like, but very, very few of them, at least for me, have the emotional impact of Peter Green. And so if you've not heard of Peter Green, after the show, or if you're listening to LRN, it'll be available at markstevens.net. You can listen to it as much as you want. You could pause it. Peter Green got his start with John Mayall's Blues Breakers as a replacement to, well, who was being called in London at the time God, and that is Eric Clapton. Eric Clapton, of course, is extremely influential, and I like Clapton. I think, especially the Beano album was fantastic. Never had the emotional impact on me that Peter Green did. Now, Peter Green, for about a year, had been, and that's another thing too. He played in a few other bands right before going into John Mayall's Blues Breakers, and Peter Green's replacement in the Blues Breakers, I put in that same category, and that's Mick Taylor, who is, wow, holy crap, who, unlike Peter, did play slide, one of the best. But he did play, there is a song, Stone Crazy. I don't remember if that's the old Buddy Guy song or not, but Rod Stewart is singing. And on bass is from Cream. Oh, man, I'm drawing a blank on his damn name, and I apologize for that. What was that? Okay. Jack Bruce. Jack effing Bruce. So you can imagine with Peter Green, Jack Bruce, and Peter Green on guitar. Good Lord, that was quite. Now that should have been. They should have had at least a whole album, but that wasn't to be. So there's somebody did release 2 hours of shows that Peter Green did with Mayall. The other thing here, what's so important about these recordings, is that not only was John McVie in the band playing bass at the time, but Mick Fleetwood was playing the drums, so it was a quartet. And so the story goes that for Peter Green's birthday, I guess it was 1967, he gave Peter Green some recording time in the studio where they recorded a few songs. And they did, and so to name his, to name the band, if they were going to do that, Peter Green chose Fleetwood Mac for Mick Fleetwood and John McVie. Although John McVie stayed with the Blues Breakers for a while, and Bob Bruning was the bass for a while, and played on some of the songs on the original Fleetwood Mac album. But yes, Fleetwood Mac, a blues band, just a fantastic British blues band, and Peter effing Green. But I wanted to point out that those recordings are so important and so awesome, because you can see to settle any kind of dispute that somebody might have, some of these stupid disputes, that Peter Green was just he just copied Clapton. No way. These people, there may have been some similarities because they had common influences, but you can't compare Peter Green to Eric Clapton. And that's what's so great. So I recommend getting these live recordings. They were released by John Mayall. He helped mix them and whatnot. So you get to hear a few of the songs that Clapton had done with the Blues Breakers, like "All Your Love," which of course was written by the recently departed Otis Rush. So you can hear the difference in the style and the way Peter Green played as opposed. And then there's Stormy Monday, which, yeah, Clapton did a fantastic job, but my gosh, Peter Green's version of that, incredible. And so even if you're a Metallica fan, you probably have heard of Peter Green. Well, if you're under 30, you've probably only heard of Peter Green because Kirk Hammett now has the famous Les Paul with that special pickup, front pickup. And that's important. Okay, because there was somebody else, another great blues player who had that guitar before, or a number of years before Kirk Hammett had it. And that is one of my favorites, of course, is another Irishman like Rory Gallagher, and that is Gary Moore. Now, Gary Moore sadly passed away 4 or 5 years ago. He owned and recorded and toured with Peter Green's own Les Paul. He actually got it from Peter Green. And as great a guitar player as Gary Moore is, I know I'm going to take some hits on this, but that's okay. You can definitely there is a difference in the playing. Yeah, Gary Moore was 100 years ahead of Peter Green as far as technical proficiency on the instrument, because there's very few guys in rock and blues that can touch Gary Moore as far as just how well you can play, your technical proficiency. But even so, you get there are some videos where Gary is playing with Mayhall, and before that he's playing Greeny's guitar and he's playing a Peter Green song. And, it's a slow blues. And as great as Gary Moore is, there's just something missing that he's just not getting. So even using Peter Green's guitar, he doesn't have the same vibrato. He's not Peter Green. That's what is so sad about what happened to Peter Green. Gosh, I love that music. I know people may be saying, "Well, who the hell is Peter Green?" And Fleetwood Mac is Buckingham and Nicks. No, Fleetwood Mac became the backing band for Buckingham Nicks. They were a blues band, and then they brought in they had Jeremy Spencer, who was just more of a copycat of some of the old blues guys. The Sky is Crying. I'm having a problem with names here today. Don't know why that is. Elmore James, yes. So Jeremy Spencer was kind of the, doing an Elmore James kind of thing. So anytime you hear older Fleetwood Mac and their slide playing, and It Hurts Me Too, it's an old Elmore James song. That's Jeremy Spencer. But they also added a fantastic lead guitar player, Danny Kerwin, who unfortunately passed away a few months ago. So by the time you get to the later concerts and recordings like Then Play On, you've got someone going back, sparring with Peter Green, which is not something that Jeremy Spencer did. He did not. Anyway, but what's so sad about Peter Green and why Buckingham Nicks even happened was because whatever there was the allegations of drugs in 1970, which also hurt Danny Kerwin. Apparently, both of them had some latent psychological issues. I don't know. But the magic kind of died because Peter Green, of course, is not dead. He still performs, and there was a splinter group, but he's not the same guy. He's not. It's sad. So if you go, because he wrote Black Magic Woman, and you can hear him playing it 20, 30 years later, and it's just not Peter Green. So if you're not familiar with Peter Green and why I feel his music so much and why it has such an impact on me, just after the show, whenever just go to YouTube, there's about 45 minutes of actual video footage of them performing live, which is really cool. That you can see them in action. And there's one's about 42 minutes long, about 42, 43 minutes long. And you'll understand. I listened to the Live at Boston show, and before you get to the Jeremy show part of it, the first few songs are Jumpin' at Shadows, which is a Duster Bennett song that Peter Green just absolutely kills it on. But as good as that is, what really will pull you in, and if not, then I don't know. If you Let Me Love You, if that does not connect with you, if you don't feel anything with that, then you're dead inside. You might as well go work for the IRS or something, because if that doesn't hit you like a ton of bricks. But then there's the other one, which I think it's gut-wrenching. If You Let Me Love You, fantastic solo, and it's not only a minute long, it's a few minutes long, but there's a 6-minute solo in the letter. Or I've Got a Mind to Give Up Living, which is an old blues standard, which, by the way, Mike Bloomfield holds his own on that one too. But when Peter Green did it on this show, it is absolutely gut-wrenching. If you want to have an example of an artist who is playing for the sheer love of playing music, and call it self-indulgent. Well, I wouldn't do that. I think I'd block and ban somebody who called Peter Green self-indulgent. That I take offense at. But it's about 5.5, 6 minutes long, and it's absolutely gut-wrenching. It's a guy that is just bearing his soul And I honestly, if I was backing him, I don't think I could continue playing if I'm in the presence of such a performance. I would just be standing there next to him, like, I imagine after that performance, they all had to take a nap or something or sit down, because that was just incredible. So that is my happy birthday kind of tribute to Peter Green. I wish that we had more, but we don't. But if you watch that 42 or 43-minute video, there is a performance in Norway. I think it's in early 1970. And they do a much shorter version of Rattlesnake Shake. Now, Rattlesnake Shake is on the originals like 3.5, 4 minutes long. But when they did it live, that's when the magic happened. Oh, especially that Boston show. It's 24 minutes long. But we get about 7 seconds of them focused on Peter Green when he's absolutely unleashed and just going. I mean, you could tell the man that he is in the zone and just killing it. And yes, it's improvised, because it's almost completely different than the other recordings of Rattlesnake Shake. So they had to pack 24 minutes of jamming into 7. And boy, did they, oh man. See, if you're a musician or artist, you can really appreciate that, creating the music in the moment and having just a free expression of ideas and emotion. And boy, did they kill it on that. I mean, the whole band. Well, Jeremy is with it could have been even better if he actually picked up his guitar, but okay. But hopefully I haven't bored anybody with my accolades for someone like Peter Green, but I fancy myself some kind of musician, and he has definitely been influential on me, especially lately. And I tell you, when you try to mimic someone like that, then you can really appreciate, because even Gary Moore at his level could not really replicate. Well, maybe he wasn't trying, but to be able to replicate that, it's not just a matter of there's something else being done. So it's not just his tight vibrato. There's something else he's adding to that. It's like Charlie Parker. A lot of people could imitate him and sound similar to him, but he still had that quality. He was still Charlie. So that's a rare musician. I'm glad he's still with us, but the magic he exhibited, whatever was inside him that he was expressing, no, it's too bad. That doesn't seem to be there anymore. Well, Tommy, the guitars are here, and this one I've got rested up against something, so it's soft. I have to get a case and a stand for it. The other one is in its case, so it's not leaned up against the wall anymore. So I stopped doing that. So, but not this particular show. One day I'll plug in and we'll do that. Got to get to, let's see, do we have any calls for the big show? Well, if you want to join me on the show, we're not just going to be talking about music. It's a soft case. Yeah, I have a hard case for my Les Paul, and I need to put it in there. Yeah, okay. Well, that's all. I don't have a it's not my guitar, so it's not I don't have a case for it. My Les Paul was a gift from a dear friend who plays the bumper music for the show now. Oh, that's embarrassing. But that was a gift from my friend Chris. So that does come with a hard case. So, but mine will go back in there. All right. So the number 218-632-9399, 218-632-9399. The passcode is 2020 with that there pound sign. I want to discuss something that just actually happened today. And I've mentioned about the Colorado Department of Revenue before. And these people are as dishonest as any tax agency out. You know, they're not. There's nothing that really makes them stand out. They are just dishonest. Why? Because it's government, and governments are just men and women who force strangers to give the money under the guise of providing services. That's criminal. Criminal. So I guess to satisfy those few people that say, well, you can't make a moral judgment. It's not objective. No, I disagree. We can certainly make a judgment that is harmful and that it is hurting people. What do you mean by harm? Well, it's taking money from them and maybe taking their houses and putting them in jail if they don't pay. That's harmful. It is certainly it's certainly not to their advantage. It is certainly going against their self-preservation. So what we're doing here with the Department of Revenue is they're making a claim, and they're saying, of course, the typical claim is, now I've already spoken to several agents and I spoke to a supervisor before we did the appeal. And I already know what the claims are. If you're physically in Colorado, then the Constitution applies. Now, they don't have any evidence to prove that. And I discussed before, just as to give you some context, because you're going to need this for the update. They use form letters. And today's letter, the denial of the appeal is no different. In the form letter, they actually say that they are going to not abate and they're going to reject our claim because my client is said that they claim that we were arguing that the tax code was voluntary. Now, this is a very common patriot, sovereign, and according to them, sovereign citizens, and Freeman on the land type, that they take something from the IRS out of context about that it's voluntary as far as self-assessment. Not that payment is voluntary. They never said that. They could, well, maybe they have said that. I haven't heard it. It's not something that anyone in the government's going to take seriously anyway. It's just I thought I took care of that. So that's what editing is for. That was really odd because the sound was totally off on that. So I don't know. Maybe it's a psyop, which we'll get to later. Okay, so I had called and spoke with them. Nobody wanted to necessarily take responsibility. That there's nothing in our appeal, nothing in our opposition to the assessment that would lead any rational person to believe that we are arguing that the tax system is voluntary. Now, when you call the DOR, part of their message is a voluntary assessment. They use the word voluntary. We didn't. And that is a false statement going through the United States mail in an effort to take this man's property. That's fraud. That's a felony. If you make a false statement in an effort to get money from somebody, that's mail fraud. So we had to formally appeal, which we did, and we laid out 4 different objections. The objection was that you are labeling me a taxpayer, and you admittedly, and we have the facts to back this up, you admittedly don't have any actual evidence, any facts to back up your claim that the laws apply to then label him a taxpayer. So to be a taxpayer, the laws have to be applicable. Well, Mark, of course the laws are applicable. He's in Colorado. Where's the evidence that and I've already spoken to the agents. Now, nobody on YouTube your opinion here is not relevant to this particular story because we're dealing with the actual agents. Just like you could believe that, well, such and such in court, I think they're guilty. Doesn't matter. Your opinion doesn't matter. So I'm talking about the actual agents here. And we have their names, and we have the dates we spoke to them. We have their admissions on record. Another one was that, again, that they falsely claimed that we're alleging the tax system is voluntary and then we don't have to pay. That's a false claim. There's no actual evidence that the Constitution and Code apply by their own admission. This is an issue of fact. Issue of fact. Not the same thing as an issue of law where you're differing on legal interpretation, such as I'm not a taxpayer within meaning of statute. That's not the same thing as when you're saying there's no actual evidence to support your claim the laws apply to even call me a taxpayer. Well, where's your evidence to prove that? We spoke to such and such and such and such, and they admitted it. Not a single fact to support their opinion, their claim. Therefore, they can't validly claim that I'm a taxpayer because that hinges on whether the laws apply to you and make you a taxpayer. So we get a form letter back. And I admit a little ignorance on my part. I didn't know who Michael Hartman was at the time. I call, and so Michael Hartman, turns out he is the head of the Colorado Department of Revenue. It was a robo-sign. It's a damn robo-sign. In there, he is using the same crap from the Internal Revenue Service. Now, again, I have to take great pains to explain this. You can raise issues that are purely of legal interpretation, and while there's nothing wrong with that, it's a very high burden to prove for you because there are different interpretations. And even if the IRS is wrong in their interpretation, it has to cross a certain line of being so absolutely wrong that no rational person or judge could possibly look at the statute and say that that's right. It's a very, very high burden. And when it comes to taxes, the plebes, our opinion, what we think the law says means absolutely nothing to these people. Nothing. Don't try to convince them otherwise because they don't care. Forcing people to give you money means never having to give a damn about what they think your laws mean. You can also have issues of fact. And here, they either have them or they don't. Or they have facts, but those facts they're not considered evidence because they don't prove the proposition. Evidence is information that has a tendency to prove the proposition. Otherwise, it's just information. That's what separates facts from evidence. So, the form letter, yeah, it's a form letter and it was robo-signed. So I had to call up and find out exactly who was responsible for the denial that they then had robo-signed by Michael Hartman. Now, Michael Hartman is on the hook because he's the boss. Remember like what Hopper said in Bug's Life? First rule of management, everything is your fault. His name is on it. It went through the mail. He is on the hook. Like your chain of causation. There's a particular agent that did that and made the determination to say that it was a frivolous appeal and then handed it over. I guess I'm going to continue getting those damn notifications. And I am sorry about that. So much for my my sound dampening. So where was I before the phone? Okay, so they don't want to tell me who it is. So I had to leave a message with the supervisors. I want to know exactly who was responsible for this decision that Michael Hartman was, his signature was given on the robo sign there. Okay, I want to know exact. See, initially they said to me, they said it was the Department of Revenue is responsible. Now I had pulled up Michael Hartman's page on the Department of Revenue, so I had a little bit of information in there that really helped me on the call. So she says to me, again, I want to know who's responsible for this decision to deny the appeal as frivolous. And she said it was the Department of Revenue, sir. And I said, because I'm looking right at the screen, the Department of Revenue has 1,500 employees. Who's responsible for this? Somebody is desperately trying to get in touch with me. Not really. All right. Hopefully that is it. Okay. So yeah, I said there's 1,500 employees. Which specific one? They won't tell me. So they say that I'm not the power of attorney. They can't give me that information about my client's account. And I said, well, wait a minute. I'm not asking you for personal information on my client. I want to know who made this determination. who was responsible for this letter? You don't have to say anything about my client. You don't have to say anything about taxes, period. You just have to tell me who's responsible for this. They don't want to tell me. They got to brush it off because this is serious business. It should be. They're making false statements and sending it through the mail. That's why they don't want to tell me. The thing is, if we appeal this, it goes to the court and it's de novo review. We're going to call the agents as we're going to call them. We're going to do discovery and we're going to find out who did that. And we're going to have them testify under oath because we're pretty good at cross-examination here. And we're going to be able to bring out and show in the documents. We don't even need them to testify. I don't even need them to testify. I'll go into that in a second. So we're going to find out Monday. I left a message with the supervisor, and we're going to find out Monday who is responsible for that letter. Now, they're not going to want to tell us, and they're probably not going to say it was the department. It was this section. Well, who in that section? You'll have to get that in discovery. Oh, there's your good faith there. There's some good faith. Yeah, good faith on your part. Because they're so confident that they're the good guy. They're so confident that what they did was right and consistent with due process and fairness, they won't even tell you who's responsible for it. Can you imagine getting a traffic ticket and they don't want to tell you who the cop is that wrote the ticket? I know I haven't used that analogy in a long time. But when you get a tax assessment, especially when it's, or a decision like this where it's signed, somebody like the cop is responsible for those legal determinations. And they already know that by answering some of my questions, it's only going to hurt them. Travis Bickle? Now that's a good username. I thought Frank Rizzo was cool, but yeah, Travis Bickle, that is cool. Okay, so what are the false statements? There is a Court of Appeals case called Crane versus Commissioner. And they just love to trot that one out when they want to arbitrarily reject your claim against them, your opposition. And what that case goes through, it talks about frivolous tax arguments. And they describe a few. And one of them has to do with that taxation is voluntary. Now, again, the actual issue we had in there was that they falsely claimed we said it was voluntary, and that's why that was a false claim made by the DOR. Now they're trying to say, still, he's arguing that the tax code is voluntary. So nobody actually read the document. No, we are opposed to this in part because you're rejecting my opposition on an argument I never raised. Yes, that is the classic straw man. So I can say, well, there's no actual evidence here, no facts to support your claim that I'm a taxpayer. And they'll say, well, the argument that you're not a taxpayer within the meaning of statute is frivolous. All the courts have rejected it. That's not my argument. It's an issue of fact, not an issue of interpretation. They have to know the difference. Any half idiot knows the difference. They're not the same. So that's why sometimes you even have to ask them, do you know the difference between an issue of fact and an issue of law? Do you know the difference between the two? Do you know the difference between interpretation of the law and a factual issue? Factual, where you're not sufficiently factual. Do you know the difference? Yes, I do. Then why are you straw manning? Are you doing that deliberately? Do you not understand my position? Did you not understand where I said that you don't have any facts? You do understand that. So you deliberately misstated my position to avoid having to address that you don't have any evidence. Is it because you don't want to be like these keyboard warriors on Facebook? You don't want to be like these critics on YouTube? You don't want to just come out and beat your chest and say, I don't have to prove that. Look, it's embarrassing to say something like that. They don't. I think I'm not speculating here. I think it's pretty easy to see they don't want to say something like that. They think that they have a case. They think they can prove their case. They think it's consistent with due process. So they don't want to say in front of somebody who's a gatekeeper, they don't want to say, I don't have to prove that. Because they know damn well there's going to be another follow-up question to that. So what they did, again, in an effort to take this man's money, and it doesn't matter if it's $10 or $100,000. They're trying to take money from him and using false statements and putting it through the mail. That is a felony. We now can show a pattern of lying with their documents. Even if we excuse the first one, we're setting them straight in no uncertain terms in the actual appeal. And even like I've mentioned before, if you go to the IRS's manual or their publication of the frivolous tax arguments, just like Meads versus Meads up in Canada, and I have a whole video I've done on this, and I've had the document in the video so you can see it. Every single frivolous argument is based on legal interpretation. Well, it's voluntary. I'm not a taxpayer within meaning of statute. I didn't earn income within meaning of statute. That's not what we're doing. And he, in the form letter, said, all of your arguments, and I'll have to maybe get a separate video so you can see his actual document. All of the arguments have been already addressed by the courts and rejected as frivolous. Really? You falsely accused me of arguing that the tax code was voluntary. So the courts have already ruled that when you accuse them of falsely accusing you and you have the evidence to prove that they're falsely accusing you and strawmanning it, the courts have said that that's frivolous? When you have the evidence to show? I got to tell you, if such a case exists, that is just more evidence that the system is rigged. And again, not one of those cases, because I've seen them and I've researched this. Again, it's in a video that I have. Anyone can go online and look up frivolous tax arguments, IRS, and you'll get the whole friggin' list. Not a single one was because they were accusing the IRS of lacking a factual foundation. Not one, because arguing that they don't have sufficient facts is never frivolous. You could be wrong, but it's not frivolous. Frivolous does not mean this douchebag disagrees with me. That's not what frivolous means. Yet, anyone who works for a tax agency or represents them, whether it's as a prosecutor or as a judge, insist that every time you disagree with a tax agency, you're not just wrong, it's frivolous. No, what is frivolous is when you make a claim against somebody and say you don't have to prove it. What's frivolous is when you have no evidence to support your claim. That is frivolous. When you knowingly misrepresent somebody's claim to avoid your lack of evidence, that's frivolous. And it's also criminal. And I can prove it. 1001. Title 18. And also mail fraud. False statements through the mail to deprive somebody of their property, their money. So obviously, you know what we're going to do on Monday. Once I find the individual who's responsible for doing that, we're going to tell we're going to tell, sir, we are already, because I'm going to do this Monday morning. All right. I already got the contact information. We're going to get in touch with the risk management for the state because they self-insure. We're going to let them know that there's a very high risk situation for the state going on right now. And we're going to tell them we already have contact with them. What specific court citation do you have? And we'll give you to the end of business today What specific case do you have where the courts have ruled that an argument that the DOR or the IRS lacks facts has been declared frivolous? I just need one. See, and that's going to show that they lied through their teeth. That's the only other explanation is that they didn't actually read it. But does that really help them out? They're still sending false statements through the mail to deprive him of his money. They didn't read it? I think that's the most likely thing. Well, I know that Michael Hartman didn't read it. He's the top guy. He's not reading these things, these everyday things. But somebody there was responsible to take that serious, was responsible on the due process to not be arbitrary and to be fair. And they lied. They pulled out a form letter and said this is frivolous. And that's why I've done this many times. I've had the document and I've said to them, give me the citation. You say the courts have ruled that this exact argument has been declared frivolous. Give me the court citation so I can verify it. And we all know they're not going to be able to. Oh, what are they going to do? Well, similar argument. Is a argument that is a issue of legal interpretation similar to an argument that says based on the agent's own admissions they don't have sufficient facts? They're not similar. Similar. And again, if that is a legal standard, that similar can mean just that it's tax related. You have no defense. You can't disagree with them because someone in court lost with a similar argument. Rigged game. That's what you get with these people. Because again, forcing people to pay you means never having to exercise good faith and never having to actually support your claim is true. You're going to make me put the cones on now. I do have some other things we'll talk about, but we'll get to the calls. Let's see what we got. Oh, Tom from the Big D, you are up first.
Hey, Mark. Glad to see you doing this on a Friday night. I'm sure it's a little tough, as we can see by the numbers, to get people to actually come here on a Friday night. And in your neighborhood neck of the woods there, it's Friday afternoon.
Yeah, I know. Well, hey, we could talk more about Peter Green.
Well, no, actually, I wanted to talk about, number one, the PRS you got in that soft case laying on the floor. All it's doing is protecting the guitar from dust. It's not doing anything for the neck. It's because I saw you put it at Wednesday. I saw you put it in the case and lay it on the floor, and I'm thinking, holy moly, what's he doing? But anyway, that doesn't matter. It's neither here nor there. It's your guitar.
No, the PRS is not my guitar.
Oh, fine. Now we got a problem.
No, I'll have to let the owner know. This is my guitar.
Yeah, the prophecy. Yep.
Yeah, I'm a Les Paul man.
Yeah, definitely. Well, anyway, and I wanted to. Oh, and another thing too. I went on a job interview today, and never fails during my interviews. Political stuff always comes up, and of course the employer is usually baiting you because it's illegal. Not that I care if it's illegal, but I try to spread the idea of liberty and the NSP and such, and I did pretty good today. I had the guy raising his eyebrows a few times, and we really agreed on a lot. So, businessmen do understand, but here's the irony: this guy is running a company that provides military parts and real high-tech military parts. So the irony there is, he sees it, but I guess he doesn't see it. I guess self-preservation overrules, right?
If this guy's making military parts, yeah, he's probably making, you know, since they've always done well, you know, especially since 9/11, they've always done very, very well. Yep. Business is always good for them.
This company is expanding massively, and I tell you what, it is the most high-tech, latest, greatest equipment I've ever seen. I got offered really a really good position. But anyway, I'd like to talk about what we talked about on Wednesday and get a little bit more clear, maybe for people that don't know, and maybe for me myself that I might not quite understand, what exactly judicial notice is and how to apply it, why it's applied, why it's used. What is it?
Judicial notice is when the judge takes notice of an adjudicative fact that is so commonly known and so and not subject to reasonable dispute that it doesn't have to be something that that needs to be played out in front of a jury to determine whether it's true or not.
Okay, that's what I assumed it to be as well. Like I brought up the example that if for some reason you needed to use the fact that the sun comes up in the east to cast a shadow, whatever, if you're trying to prove some kind of a fact in a court case, that would need to be taken as a judicial notice that the sun does come up in the east. We don't need to go into scientific, you know, we don't need scientists here or professionals or whatever you want to call it to witness to it. Would that be reasonable to say?
Yeah, and so it's a rule of law of evidence that allows a fact to be introduced into evidence if the truth of the fact is so notorious or well known or so authoritatively attested that it cannot reasonably be doubted. So yeah, that if it's something like, is the sun gonna, is the earth going to continue moving around and the sun appear to come up again in the east tomorrow? Yeah, that would something. That's not something that needs to go before the jury to be decided. It can go in. So if you are at trial, it's not. It's something that has already been taken notice that this is true, and we don't. And the trier, the plaintiff or the defendant does not have to lay, does not have to lay out a foundation and actually prove that with evidence and testimony, during the trial.
Right. Okay. I just wanted to make sure I understood that. And you were saying they can be adjudicated facts. Like they can't be, like the last time we talked, they're not, obviously they're not things that the prosecutors say. What do you mean by adjudicated facts?
Adjudicated fact is something that generally is going before the jury, that is going to be subject to, it goes to proving the prosecution's claims or the defendant's claims. And it's something that is subject to cross-examination and the usual safeguards in the trial to allow the trier of fact, the jury, to determine whether the facts are credible.
Well, how would that apply give me an example of how the prosecutor or the defendant would say, that he wants the judge to take this as judicial notice. Give me an example besides my goofy sun coming up in the east.
Okay. Let's say that there are four. There's a light on a very common corner. Let's say the light has lights on all four corners. I'm just trying to throw something out at the, on the spur of the moment here. So instead of having to show photographs that there are indeed four lights on that corner, they take judicial notice ahead of time, so they don't actually have to show pictures and whatnot to prove that particular fact to the jury.
Okay. That one sounds a little flimsy because I could see that coming up in some kind of a case to prove that, in an accident case or something, that they would show something like that. But
yeah, but I
get the concept.
Yeah, I'm just trying to give you an explanation of what would be considered adjudicated fact. Now that is a bad example, but I think as far as what an adjudicated, but I think it demonstrates, it illustrates what is meant by that. It's a fact that's supposed to be, that's a part, and it's, it is part of the the support for the prosecutor's claim or allegation.
Right. or defendant, right?
Or defendant, yes. If you're arguing irresistible impulse or mental defect, then yes, you have to present your facts, and there may be certain facts. Again, I'm having trouble giving you a really good example. Or let's say, for example, that the average guitar has 6 strings.
The what?
An average guitar has 6 strings.
Oh, I see.
Or let's say the major scale consists of, a whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half.
Right.
Is that something you really need to go to the jury to prove? No. And here's an adjudicative fact for you. Do you really need to bring before the jury that Peter Green is one of the greatest blues guitar players ever?
Correct. That's right. It's a known fact.
It's a known fact. It's not up for reasonable dispute. It's authoritatively attested to. He's in the Hall of Fame, for goodness sake.
That's right.
But all right.
Well, I wanted.
Well, before you go, let me ask you. Depending on the jurisdiction, is judicial notice limited to only adjudicative facts?
That I could not answer.
You know,
what does jurisdiction have to do with a fact that is so well known, like the sun coming up in the east? Who cares where you're at? I mean, does it really matter? I guess it must, since you asked me that question.
Well, what I'm getting at is that there's a couple, some very important issues here, because they've requested, and judges have taken judicial notice of prosecutors' allegations, which, like you said, jurisdiction is an allegation. Now,
right. Yep.
So from what I read, and again, this is just Wikipedia, but it's that they're adjudicative facts. Are there some jurisdictions that allow for more than just adjudicative facts to be taken judicial notice of?
If you're asking me that, I don't know.
You see, I've mentioned this like 12 times this year.
Well, I heard you mention about the last time we talked about this, about California. You got another person came on right after me and brought up a suggestion of how to use, or what he thought would be a good way to use, judicial notice to corner the judge and then go into the questioning. And you mentioned something about California. So please go ahead and elaborate. I'm listening.
Yeah, California allows for judicial notice, and this is section, I believe it's section 455 of the evidence code. But it's definitely between 451 and 455. So it's one of those, but it's there. They allow judicial notice, and this is why I use a request for judicial notice, of adjudicative facts and the law, what the laws say, not whether they apply to somebody, what they say, what they mean, and also of rulings of the California and United States Supreme Court. The ruling, not the dicta, the ruling.
Right.
So you have to provide them with, so let's say for me, I want them to take judicial notice that there is a narrow exception to the Anti-Injunctive Tax Act, which is Article 13, Section 32 of the California Constitution. In the Duke Majan case, which is based on Western Oil, which based that off of the Enoch case from the United States Supreme Court, there is a narrow exception, and very clearly in the ruling that the Anti-Injunctive Tax Act's prohibition on prepayment court proceedings and causes of action must yield to the requirements of the federal Constitution. So if you can show that, the narrow exception is if they are violating the federal Constitution and they can't prevail under any circumstances, that's your narrow exception. So yeah, they can take judicial notice of that particular ruling, and that's what it means. But as far as I know, California is the only one that allows that. So,
and I can see now why you were trying to explain that to the guy that called in, and I can see what he was going after to try to lock them in a little bit. So, yeah. But again, they make up the rules as they go. So good luck with that. But
They do.
All right, well, I'd like to.
I want to read directly from Rule 201 and how they don't necessarily go by the rules. Now, in California, they have a specific exception where they've, in addition, other places, if there's in the law, that may be true, but I haven't seen that. But the rules 201, judicial notice of adjudicated facts, kinds of facts. It doesn't say anything in here about the law. So as far as the rule is concerned, but in California, they do allow that. But again, under absolutely no circumstance does judicial notice allowed of a prosecutor's argument. The prosecutor's allegation against you, especially since it's an element of the crime, under no circumstances is that consistent with due process, though. I mean, to take judicial notice of jurisdiction, that flies in the face of whatever the critics say, saying that, well, jurisdiction is a trial issue. Well, if it's a trial issue and it's for the trier of fact, then you can't take judicial notice of that. And it absolutely is not where it is not so notorious or well known or so authoritatively attested that it cannot reasonably be doubted. That's so. But hey, everyone's an expert apparently.
Right. Otherwise, I mean, you think about that. Why even have the word jurisdiction? And if it didn't need to be proven, it just would be. I mean, you just go to court. You know what I mean? Why even have the word?
Well, they had to do that because, so one of the reasons I say would be because if we sue them, where is the out for them if we sue them, if it's not jurisdiction 99% of the time?
Yeah, you know, we talk about that a lot, and I've heard you talk about that, and everybody talk about that. How does, like, if we go to sue a judge, they claim immunity. Now, how do they bring, why would they claim that you don't have jurisdiction? Because they have immunity? Is that
yes?
How would they apply this?
Because absolute immunity or sovereign immunity or immunity period denies jurisdiction. That it denies the court jurisdiction from proceeding. You otherwise would have jurisdiction, but because they have immunity, it doesn't attach.
I see. Okay. All right. Well, that covers jurisdiction pretty good. Now, the second thing I wanted to bring up was the Brady. And I watched the end of Making a Murderer. And again, I won't do a spoiler alert. And Brady is mentioned a lot in there. And I see that it is obviously part of Brady is exculpatory evidence that was not given to the defense that the prosecutor knows about. But like, what are other examples of Brady?
For example, it's all information that can be used. Brady deals, I think, almost exclusively with exculpatory evidence, where it's information or evidence that shows that you're innocent. And that one of the big things that I have on there is that they are supposed to let you know if their witnesses lack personal knowledge of the matters they're testifying to. So I take that to be because that information can be used to impeach the witness, because you can impeach the witness in two ways: competency and credibility. And if he doesn't have personal firsthand knowledge, he's not competent.
Right. Okay.
So they're supposed to tell you.
Basically what I wanted to touch on. Thanks for your time, Mark. I'll let somebody else get in there.
No problem. Good to talk with you again. Tom from the Big D. Yeah. Oh, sorry about that, dumb boy. Yeah. So, well, you know, it's not just administrative courts that they make up the rules as they go. It's pretty much any court where you've got a judge that is really biased in favor of the prosecution. So when it comes to an issue of jurisdiction, they're never going to say to you, if you file against the judge, they're never going to say, well, the judge is arguing sovereign immunity or absolute immunity, and sorry, Mr. Judge, and you're going to have to argue absolute immunity at trial. You know, just, you know, so yeah, they do make things up as they go. They don't apply the rules nearly as evenly as they could, and still Rule 602 is ignored. They ignore that so many times. Just the rule that it is a substantive due process right. It's one of the most serious, due process protections of cross-examination of your witness. I have seen them throw that out the window so many times. It is something we actually anticipate, so that people aren't surprised at trial. That when you ask that witness, what facts do you rely on to support your determination that the laws apply to me because I'm physically in Arizona? Every single time, they will object, and it will never be an objection that's on point, and they will deny you cross-examination. I have to address this. You guys don't even know what a state versus 14th Amendment citizen is. Really? Are you really arguing that the 14th Amendment created a different type of citizenship? All that was, the 14th Amendment was like, everybody, welcome to the plantation. As if that makes a difference. Because bottom line, Eric, bottom line here is go after the claims they're actually making against you. You start talking and making assertions that the state citizen is different than a 14th Amendment citizen, which has no merit whatsoever. You do that, you have a burden of proof. And if you can't accept that taking a burden of proof on yourself, especially in a tax case, a typical code violation case, if you don't get why that's wrong to take a burden on yourself, boy, because first of all, they don't give a damn what your interpretation of the law is. They don't care. They don't care. There is one person whose legal interpretation matters in court. One, and it ain't yours. And it's not the prosecutors. It's the judge. That jury is not looking at the prosecutor necessarily as an expert in the law. They're looking at the judge. He is the only legal interpretation that matters in that court. What he says is from the hand of God himself until another judge turns it over. Because the prosecutor is definitely going to accept whatever the judge says as coming from Odin himself. The prosecutor's whole life is dictated by what judges say. Their reality is what the judge says it is. So you make things 100 times more difficult for yourself in an already corrupt system by taking a burden of proof on yourself. Ay, ay, ay. What proves that you're not a citizen is the fact that they don't have any actual evidence to prove that they're citizens, because they can't prove that there are obligations of allegiance and protection due and owing. They were never created, because you can't create obligations by using violence, using aggression. Anyway, let's get back. He's been on before. Mark from San Diego, welcome back to the big show.
What's up, Mark?
Trying to dispel some myths, Mark.
Can you hear me, buddy?
I can. I just trying to dispel some myths again.
Oh man. Yeah, I just called the city attorney today because I got her meet and confer letter in my email, and I got a surprising confession out of her this morning.
Okay.
I've run her through the whole. The prosecutor never had any facts to support their position, and how exactly did I put that? Give me 1 second. Let me remember exactly how I put that.
You've been on hold the whole time now. Yeah.
I know. I was reading through the damn letter, but I took her down the whole. What evidence did the prosecutor have to initiate the action anyway? And it was a little bit more in-depth and a little more detailed than that. But she's told me straight up, they don't need evidence. They don't need evidence.
Wow.
Well, I need evidence I needed evidence to institute this civil action against you. But she told me straight up that the prosecutor didn't need evidence.
How did you respond to that?
I was like, okay, they don't need evidence to institute a criminal action, huh?
Wow, yeah, wow. So how did you follow up with a good leading question?
Oh, you know what? I actually took her down through a couple of other paths.
You let her off the hook?
I took her down the name game one. I came up with this one, and I asked her, if the all caps name on the complaint meant anything, and she couldn't really answer with a yes or no. I asked her if it was possibly because the court had viewed me as a member of the body politic. She danced around that question. And then I asked her if the court did, in fact, view me as a member of the body politic, would that have meant that they viewed me as one of the people of the state of California? And again, she couldn't really answer that without going into a narrative.
But why, Mark, you're killing me. Why would you do that when you have a prosecutor saying that they don't need evidence? Why would you let her go and not follow up with some really good leading questions? A good leading question would be, oh, really? So can I make legal claims against the prosecution without evidence? Do I get that privilege?
Well, right. Basically, I did do that.
Oh, well,
and
okay.
She's like, I said, this all has to be based on evidence, right? And she said, yeah. And I said, well, the evidence that these laws are applicable to you is through your oath to the oath that you took, the signature on that piece of paper that you put down. Yeah. She kind of like, there was a long pregnant pause in there on some of these questions.
But Mark, the thing is, none of that is relevant. You have a prosecutor who's admitting that they can institute a criminal proceeding against you, write a criminal complaint against you, and not have any facts.
Right.
You don't let her off the hook by talking about things like the name game and things like that. You right there, you have to finish them off. You don't change the subject and get into these other things. Again, a big question is, do I get to argue against you without evidence? And then when they say, well, of course not, and their head explodes and they want to call the cops on you for even suggesting that, then you ask them, tell me exactly why it's fair for why is it fair? So tell me exactly why it's fair for the prosecution to argue without evidence. They don't need evidence, but I do. Oh,
right. I ask those questions not in those express terms, but I asked those questions in kind of a roundabout way. And she proceeded to tell me about how, well, you don't think the laws apply to you. And I'm like, whoa, back up. Hold on, lady. You're mischaracterizing what I'm saying. I'm saying that the prosecution never had evidence to support their claim that the laws were applicable. And she kept going back and trying to mischaracterize what I was saying.
And you may actually say, I'm going to repeat my question, my position to you. Could you just repeat it back so that you finally can understand what exactly I'm saying? I'm saying my position is, listen, the prosecution doesn't have any facts to support their claim that the code applies because I'm physically in California.
Exactly.
But if they're not going to address it, then they're just being dishonest, and you have to catch them on that. I don't understand why is it, and you can accuse them. Are you deliberately, a leading question, are you deliberately misstating my position and being dishonest?
Right. I should have hit him with the leading question right there. I went out of my way and I asserted. Sorry.
Always be leading questions.
Right. I got a couple for you. I wanted to get at you. It was last week sometime. And this kind of revolves around your first caller last Saturday, I believe it was, about being labeled. You know, because we're going in there and we're exercising, we're going in there and challenging them on their authority. Now, I actually did ask the city attorney, and she's actually defending the municipal corporation, by the way.
Okay.
But I asked her if the prosecutor was exercising the sovereign power of the state, and I was like, yes or no. And she wouldn't answer yes or no. I believe so, I guess is what she answered. And then I go, well, do they consider themselves to be a citizen of the state? And she goes, well, I would assume so. Oh, so they're sovereign citizens. Okay, cool. Next question.
You're killing me here, Mark. I'm in physical pain from what you're telling me. You have the opportunity. I'm in pain listening to this. You have the opportunity to get statements that you can use against them that could help your case. She admitted they didn't have the evidence.
Right. I'm definitely holding her to that one.
Well, but these other things, there are other admissions that you should be getting. Did the police? All right. So you're saying they don't need evidence. So is it fair to say that the witnesses against me didn't have personal knowledge of the matters they testified to?
I brought her down through that one too, and she seems to believe that all these officers have lawful authority to do this. I even brought her through the fact that their municipal code is void for vagueness on so many different counts. The entire charter needs to be revoked. But
no, dude, you're again, to be able to make your case against them, you have to show that they didn't have evidence and brought it in bad faith. Okay. So your focus should be, and if she's not going to answer, you can tell her, man, we could do this informally like we are doing now, or you can exercise bad faith. I'll seek sanctions against you and I'll do it in writing in formal discovery. So we're here. Answer the question. Do the cops, the witnesses that were called against me, the cops, since you already said that they didn't need evidence, so that's not even an issue. You already admitted they don't have evidence. So is it fair to say that the witnesses, the police officers, did not have personal knowledge of the matters they testified to?
Exactly. That's actually all in the complaint.
But you have to prove that. You have to prove you have to do what they are not necessarily required to do. You have to actually prove it by a preponderance of evidence. And so these are things you can use against them. And you can help.
Do you think I can get that evidence elicited through interrogatories?
Well, you can ask them directly, what proof do the witnesses have, and that the prosecution had, to show that the witnesses had personal firsthand knowledge of what they were testifying to, namely that the laws applied to me? Where is the proof that there's personal knowledge of that? That's discoverable information. That was Brady information prior.
Right. I made those claims in the complaint. In the Second Amendment complaint, it's pretty well pled. She's trying to go through this same list. Allegations for public entity liability must be specifically pleaded. It was. Second Amendment complaint fails to state facts sufficient to constitute a cause of action. You didn't have evidence.
And when you respond to that, you can say, by her own admission, evidence is not necessary. She's actually arguing against her own client's position without realizing it, in an attempt to show that you don't have sufficient facts.
Right.
So I would certainly, in my motion, seek sanctions against her and use her words against her. She said they don't need evidence to file a criminal complaint, and that's just not true.
Exactly. Okay. Cool, man.
Wow. And I got to tell you, for you or anyone going through this, if you have a prosecutor, a city attorney, and you're actually be able to discuss these matters with them, stick to the claims that they have made. Don't get into this name game crap, because just doing that gives her grounds. One, you get off point and you let her off the hook. Not okay. And two, now you've given her grounds to smear you in front of the judge as a sovereign citizen.
Oh, right. Well, that's what the basis of that second set of questions was for, is to elicit the confession that they are in actuality the sovereign citizens. But that's, I guess, neither here nor there at the moment.
But that's nothing that you need to prove. I just wouldn't do it. I would not.
All right.
It. So
all right, I do realize how dangerous it could be.
Yeah, and we have to stay on point. You know, the role playing yesterday with Ace, he was a newbie, is a really good example of that. And Robbie and whoever was, you know, and playing judge, very easy to get someone off point when they're making assertions, or and especially when they're not asking leading questions and they don't stay focused on what the actual issue is. You have an objective you're trying to meet. When you're going into an arraignment, a cross-examination, whatever it is, you have to know what the objective is so that you can ask good leading questions to get to that point. Once you get to that point and you've got it, all right, you know, if they're giving you your time, ask some other questions. But make sure you get the admissions you need first. Meet your objective. And this name game stuff, right. Yeah, I've said on the air before, well, if you doubt it, go ask. But I'm not suggesting people actually do that, not at least not in a court setting.
Oh, well, we weren't in court. This was on the phone today, so.
Well, but I mean, you're still involved in a court proceeding and something like that. She'd be like, "Oh, we got a sovereign citizen here. We're going to get this thrown out with prejudice."
That's part of my claim, is that they're defaming my character and discriminating against me because they think I'm a sovereign citizen.
Okay, well, don't give them any ammunition to use against you. She could turn around and say, right. Your Honor, when we spoke on the phone, it was all the same stupid buzzwords you hear from the sovereign citizen. He was asking me about if you name it all caps, and the judge is going to, yep, we got a live one here, dismissed with prejudice. You got it. Do you want costs with that too? You just send them a bill. I'll sign off on it.
Can I get a jail sentence with that to go, please?
Can I serve that at home?
Hey, so as far as the criminal action, it's all been resolved. However, there is a 6-month statute of limitations under Section 1018 of the Penal Code to file a motion to vacate the judgment. Do you think it would be wise to file one of those?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I got it. No evidence.
Well, I'm glad you did sort of, you did okay on the call. So next time you speak to them, or, keep it more focused and don't get into that other stuff.
All right. I want to get back, into the role play thing too. I didn't think you guys were doing that this week. Otherwise, I would have tried to get into that.
Well, you got to contact me first at Frank Rizzo 3, and then I can take care of getting you into the chat, and we can get you the link for the Discord.
Yeah, I did that last week. I was listening in, and then I contacted you, and I contacted Rika too, and it didn't seem like it was going to happen, so I just kind of worked all day, and instead, I would have much rather done some role play yesterday and sharpened up my chops.
For you and everyone listening, you got to contact me, because if there's not enough interest in doing it, and this goes for people who just want to listen, I have to know what kind of interest it is, because I'm not in a position to, I don't have the luxury of free time because of the financial situation I'm in. So I have to make productive use of so if there's enough interest in it, so everyone needs to let me know, just check in, dude, I want to do it. And I can see how many, and then we do it. So I wasn't going to do it yesterday, and I'm glad that I did. But so keep that in mind. It's all based on how many people are interested, and you let me know at Frank Rizzo 3 on Skype. Okay.
Definitely. I'm in for next week, by the way.
All right. Sounds good. We'll talk to you then.
All right, brother.
All right. Appreciate the call. Mark in San Diego, you know, the only time after I meet my objective, or if I've gotten to a point with a bureaucrat where they're not going to go any further and they're going to end the call, if I'm going to ask another question, it may just be, if I was to do business and operate in the same manner as your organization, and I forced perfect strangers to give me money, would you consider me a criminal? Because that still goes to what, and it goes to strip away the veneer of good faith that they could possibly be acting under, because it cuts through all that happy horse crap, all that stuff, all this stuff about states and citizens, blah, 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 all that. It cuts through all of it. If I acted in the same manner as you, would you consider me a criminal? Well, yeah. And that is exactly why, and I've even said to them, that is exactly why you're having so much trouble answering my questions, because you can't. There's no possible way these rules could apply and create obligations on me, because you force people to give you money, and that does not create any obligations and cannot create any obligations. It's the force, stupid. It is that violence, the aggression, using a prison system and destroying people's life under the guise of providing services. That's criminal. Any mafia, La Cosa Nostra, Mano Negra, they can say the same thing. That is called extortion. And that's why their rules don't apply. Were Al Capone's victims, were there really obligations to buy only his beer? Is anyone going to seriously argue that there was any kind of moral or kind of obligation created because they were being forced only to buy his beer? You have to keep buying. Well, you must have agreed. You've been buying Al Capone's beer for 5 years. You must have known you were obligated to do that. That is the exact same form of argument that the IRS uses if you are charged with not filing a return. Well, you filed over here. You knew you were required. Oh, that's right, because I'm the same person I was 5 years ago with the same exact understanding. See, unlike you, Mr. IRS man, I actually go and try to further my education and continue to improve my arguments and improve my view of the world. I don't just take what was spit out by some politicians and then put the blinders on and say, oh, the world doesn't change. My view of the world doesn't have to change. Hey, let's get to Jason in Mississippi. Good old Mississippi.
Mike.
Jason.
How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing all right. How you doing?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad.
Yeah, for being in Mississippi, not too bad, right?
Not too bad. You know, how you doing?
Well, just doing a little show here. Got Peter Green's birthday coming up soon, so I'm going to spend a little more time practicing my my vibrato to kind of mimic that.
My Peter was green once, and then I washed it. They got back to normal.
Now, you see, I should cut you off the show for trying to make
I'm sorry,
a filthy joke
I'm sorry. Hey,
out of the green god.
My bad.
We don't joke about
My
the
bad.
green god here on this particular show. Go call, you know.
Yes, sir. Listen, I was just thinking, I had a question for you. You've been doing this for a minute. The bailiffs in the courtroom. Okay. Now, through all the sovereign citizen stuff and all that, right? You hear about the special training that judges and prosecutors get, you know, where they'll take them and teach them logical fallacies and all this. Is there any special training for the bailiffs that you know of? I mean, are they speaking a language that we don't know about, or, you know, are they cued into rules of the court that we're not aware of?
I don't know that they have. I would err on the side of that they aren't given legal training. That's not their job, is to protect the judge and the clerk and whatnot, and to hand evidence to the judge if it's that kind of court. I imagine by being in the court, they might, like some people who like to troll my channel, they think that just being in the court that makes them an expert on the way of legal procedure and whatnot, and all the intricacies of legal procedure. So I'm sure they know more about legal procedure than the average person does, but I certainly wouldn't say that they were experts or that they had specific training. They might actually get some training as far as like from the FBI regarding, like you mentioned about the sovereign citizen type stuff and how, and that they're dangerous individuals and domestic terrorists. I'm sure that I would be almost certain that I have no evidence, but I think I believe I would be right in saying that they do get that kind of training. Right.
Because, well, the way I got to you, I'd started studying all of this stuff at once, and it went into religion and Freemasonry and just, natural laws and all this stuff, right?
Natural law.
And what makes that stuff, what makes that so appealing to people is because it reeks of freedom, it reeks of getting out of the system, right? Everybody, and that's all we all want, so it is tempting when you go and you read, maritime law and in the common law and all that stuff. I mean, it's because it's giving you quick and, answers to what you're looking for. How does this person have control over me, and how do I get out of it?
Well,
and whether it's true or holds water, they do offer answers within that, Now that the courts choose to ignore all that, there's nothing we can do. But sometimes, you can kind of see how the courts and the judges and all got to where they're at through all that stuff, You
think so? You think the judges got to where they are? The average judge gets to where he is because he went through all that stuff, the religion, the Masonry, Illuminati, natural law?
Well, a majority of the courthouses that I've ever been in, if you walk around enough, you will find a stone somewhere on that building or on the grounds with the compass and the square and all that stuff, So it's at least associated, if not adhered to by them,
yeah, but
they're the ones that built.
But that could just be because as far as building it, or it was the fact because they helped finance the building. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily that there's any actual influence on what the day-to-day operations in the court. I mean, that's like the whole thing about it's the Jews. That just because the Jews are like, oh, the head of CNN he's a Jew. That he has editorial, he has editorial control over the day-to-day operations, what happens on individual shows in CNN. That some global Jewish. It's funny because I was working out this morning before I started. Something came up on a YouTube thing, and it was Borat, and he was singing "Throw the Jew Down the Well."
Right.
Oh my gosh! It's because the Jews control everything. But here, even if I want to see the evidence, but I don't. I think it's fair to say that judges will go through some training with like Meads versus Meads and have an understanding of some of the arguments that they use. Are they going through necessarily natural law? I mean, how many do you think judges can actually quote St. Aquinas and actually get, and are so deep into philosophy that they know and understand things like natural law? Oh, come on, really?
Well, I think that contributes to the system because I think you got a few guys that maybe are higher up that do kind of understand those principles, but then you have your lower level courts where they don't necessarily understand those principles. Because my take on this is a lot of these people that get into that system, if they're going in as a bailiff or a police officer or a judge, I think majority of people go in with the good intention that they want to serve their community, they want to do something positive, they want to protect people, right? That's what they go into it with. And then the training they receive once they get there, all that's thrown out the window, and it does become a matter of you know, we have to generate revenue. This is how we feed ourselves, you know.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are naive to the concept of what's going on. They think it's a patriotic duty to just take this training at face value and then enforce it, you know.
Yeah,
I watch a lot of these auditor videos, and I love them, you know. Some of them, you know, I think I would do things differently if I were going to bother to go out and do that. But one of the things that never really gets brought up when these people are arguing with police or whatever is, you know, you got to go back to that moment in time when this person that's your adversary now, they decided voluntarily to get into this. Nobody forced them. There was no draft there, you know. And, you know, so they were given all this power or authority, right? Because one morning they got up and decided, hey, I want to do this for a living. You know, yeah, I could go to my community tech center or whatever, learn how to weld or learn how to drive a truck, or I could do all these, but no, I want to work with guns and I want to tell people what to do. And they never put two and two together on what they're actually stepping into, you know, because sometimes things do go sideways and, you know, it becomes a violent situation.
Yeah.
I
would say
they're the victim, you know.
I would say it comes down to the basic government type of education you get. They're taught that government is a necessary evil and that some are worse than others, that the Western government, Western European or English type, you know, the parliament and president or prime minister is the best. And I think what most are lacking is that classical kind of education where you are getting into philosophy. And I think if there was more of an emphasis on philosophy and getting into the trivium or the scientific method, and skepticism was pushed more, and that people should be skeptical and look for the evidence. I think I don't think you could expect that people going through criminal justice to become a cop or they're going through law school, they're not going to be focusing on something like what Aquinas was talking about as far as natural law and being a good person. They're certainly not going to teach what the Stoics taught. And they're absolutely, I would be certain that they're not going to be discussing you know, rational secular ethics, you know, right from wrong, because we're raised not so much to know right from wrong, we're raised to know legal from illegal. And
illegal, right.
And that is such a perversion. And I can hear a couple of people screaming now, there is no ethics. There are certain standards that are agreeable. And when it comes to a disagreement on a rational secular ethics, if someone turns around and says, you can't say that that's right and wrong, well, what if we did it to you? Oh, you don't want me to attack you. Tell me why. Tell me why.
Right.
And that is the basis of it.
A lot of people are taught to ignore that.
Yeah. Well, they're taught that if they are taught rational secular ethics, if they are taught the basic right and wrong, that it's wrong to hurt people, if they are taught that, the legal and illegal takes precedent over that, and the worship of authority, which of course Stanley Milgram has shown and has been replicated. I don't have the studies off the top of my head. That overrides that, and there are other things that can override it. If you don't know the victim, if you don't have if you've not seen the victim's face, so it's very easy for bankers to do what they do and just decimate, you know, entire populations. Economically, they don't care. It's like Chris Christie could shut down a bridge in New Jersey, and that actually led to someone dying because emergency, medical couldn't get through. Somebody actually died from what was reported. So it's because Chris Christie is so far removed from the victim that it's easy to override that because it's not a concern. You're not actually seeing it. It's why, and I'm not going to discuss this in detail. It's why when people actually see what happens in a factory farm and how unbelievably horrid an existence and a demise that they tend to rethink whether that's something I want to support or not. So they are removed from that. And last thing before to reiterate, the disconnect between moral and legal and illegal is huge. That is and we've all probably can talk about the experience where you try to bridge that gap and say that just because something is legal doesn't mean it's moral and you should do it. And the resistance that you get from that. I understand that well, because I've spoken to so many tax agents and bureaucrats where we're trying to do that, because we're trying to show that this is unfair. And if you can have some kind of mutual agreement as to what is moral, and you can then take what they actually believe is immoral and show that their actions conflict with that, that can be powerful.
Right. Well, for me, a light at the end of the tunnel in all of this, you know, or the great monkey wrench is, you know, as I'm looking at it, is 20 years ago, it was a whole different ball game. I mean, and we're catching up slowly, but because of the internet and the access and guys like yourself that are getting out and talking about these things, I mean, like I had the concept of this stuff for the majority of my life, right? I'm 42 now, but it was only in the last 4 or 5 years that, you know, I've came across your materials and others that has actually given me the vocabulary or the vernacular to go in and express it a little better, right? I always knew that, you know, if a judge gets you in there, pulls you in there against your will, they're expecting you to play this game. You don't know the rules too, and then they're not going to tell you the rules, but you're liable for money or your time and all these things, and they'll never take a moment to even give you the appearance of a level playing field, you know. Guys like yourself, you know, it's like, at least you're, you know, that information is out there now, and it's never going to go away. You know, it might take another 15, 20, 30, 80 years to catch up to the map, but I think it's spreading quicker than we, you know, can realize. And I think that's beautiful. Yeah. And I thank you again for everything you do, because, you know, the more, because it's knowledge, it's the lack of knowledge, or if you have knowledge when you go into these things, any kind of legal dispute, what's moral and what's immoral, and, you know, unethical. We all, at the core of us, know this stuff, but in practice, it gets muddled, you know.
Well, and I like to think that everybody knew the basics, but that is actually not true. I think because of the internet, obviously in the last 20 years, I mean, you've got a lot more people, a lot more keyboard warriors now who are using the word straw man than you would have 10 years ago. I mean, so you know, it helps that with that football ref, which was great. I think that started out on Reddit. So they put the logical fallacies in there, and people can learn that. But certainly I think things are getting better, and I like to think that there is a trend to more rational thought and skepticism, and that people don't just accept things at face value, that people are not going to accept that just because a lawyer says it, or even if just because a judge says it, that means it's true. So some people think that, and you confront, you want to give them examples that are easily verifiable, that conflict with their view of the world. Oh, so judges are never wrong? Then why are there at least two levels of appellate courts? Well, because judges are wrong.
It is a process, though. I know. Listen, I'm with you now on the whole sovereign thing. But when I first started researching all this, you know, you come into this treasure trove of information. You know, you've got all your Carl Lentz's and all these guys, and, you know, they're laying it out for you. They're showing you documentation. They're telling you their success stories and all this stuff, you know, and it looks so good, because all we want is to not be subject to this stuff anymore.
Right? I want to be left alone.
And I think your approach so far to me has been the most logical way, you know, and that's just, hold them to their claims. Don't back off. Keep it on point. Don't let them derail you, because that's part of their training, is to derail you. Just throwing you off your game and stuff. And this isn't stuff we do every day as normal, regular, everyday people. We're not in courts every day arguing these topics and stuff. Usually if somebody has to go to court, it's got shock value to it, because, that's not our world, but then we're supposed to go in there and either hire an attorney and spend all this money, or try to go in and defend ourselves. And it's not what we do,
Well, most people have lives and they can't. But I think this is my experience. I believe that if people are rooted in logic and they understand and have a decent understanding of some philosophy and how to recognize a bad argument, whether you are in court or not, that I think gives you a leg up on the vast majority, because when you're in court, being able to recognize a bad argument is your bread and butter. If you don't understand basic logic, and then how are you possibly going to know when someone is because someone could be a real sophist and it can give you what appears to sound very logical. And if you don't know how to recognize a bad argument, you could accept it, and to your detriment. So there's just a serious lack of critical thought and analysis, and I don't believe it's really taught in schools. I didn't learn it in school so much. It was just more my background is just because of my background, I just am a distrusting person. You just seem to because of your, how you're raised or whatnot, in the environment, you tend to have a really good BS meter. And I grew up on Long Island, and I just developed a knack early on to when somebody was feeding me a line of crap. But I've been able to articulate it and hone that skill and be a lot better by getting into philosophy, understanding the basic principles of logic, and being able to recognize when somebody is trying to dodge the question. As you mentioned, that what lawyers do is to avoid the issue. So they're masters at that. You got to give props where it's due. Lawyers are very good at distraction and getting you off point. And if you listen to the Call of Shames, especially the last one I posted, this is a really good example. I mean, not many people have seen it yet, which is really disheartening, but it shows how effective the Socratic method is at getting these admissions. He agreed with me when I said, so it's just an assumption. He says, yeah, that's wow. That's pretty good.
Big. That's huge.
That's huge. Well, Tom's saying, did Socrates argue? And I want to point out that he was just asking questions. Now, in a classical sense, if he took an opposing view, then you could say that he wasn't in some context arguing, but just asking questions. I don't think that was an argument. So what Tom is saying here, what makes the Socratic method is great, and what really helps to have a good Socratic dialogue is if both people understand, the one who's questioning and the one who's got the claim, if both at least have some acceptance that they may not have the absolute, the truth. If both sides accept, and this is rare. It's why I was not able to get into, a discussion, a Socratic dialogue with someone like Larkin Rose. He doesn't accept that he could be wrong. And that's why he wouldn't discuss it with me. He would not present his argument and allow me to question him. Says, I take it from a standpoint, look, I don't know. It could be true, but I don't have all the context. So I'm going to ask you questions to help me understand better to bring this out. If along the line, you're not able to support your position, we both still win because we both have a better understanding of each other and a better understanding of your position. And it shouldn't be this Ben Shapiro crap that someone has to, Ben Shapiro, excoriates and humiliates and literally kills the libtards with logic and
right.
No, and I think again, I'm belaboring the point. I think that's something that's sorely lacking. It's being able to have some humility that you could be wrong, and allow someone to ask you those questions. Why do you think what do you think is the main reason why these lawyers and bureaucrats tend not to want to answer my questions, at least after they get they see where I'm going with it?
Well, at the end of the day, it means they're bread and butter. Because if they start admitting that you're right and they're wrong, then what are they there for? It's like then they need to go learn how to drive a truck or weld or do something. Be a nurse.
I don't
do something else. Like
I don't think that's it. Because if like with this, if they were to just throw abate this assessment, they just go on about their day as if nothing happened. The stakes are not very big for them. You're right. If you've got one with a conscience who realizes, oh my gosh, oh, excuse me, mate, are we the baddies? Right.
Well, and also
no one really.
You gotta keep, like, with myself anyway. I assume, and like until I came across your material, the most I knew about Socrates came from like Bill and Ted's Excellent Journey.
No,
that was the majority of the Socratic, ideas that I'd had.
Well, at least be good, be excellent to each other. So good.
Be excellent to each other. And again, I'm gonna get off the phone. I know you got other calls, but as far as giving props go, I'm not trying to fanboy on you, but I think from what I've seen, you've been the best teacher of this topic that I've came across, and it's a gift, and I'm appreciative of what you do. So keep up the good work, sir.
I appreciate that. Thanks. Appreciate that. We are getting near the end of the big broadcast, but I want to still address, I do appreciate the call from Jason from Missouri, Mississippi, rather, and Mark from San Diego, and Tom from the Big D. And someone saying here, I think it's Eric. And Eric's making a point that we're all pacifists. And I at least for myself, now some anarchists may actually be pacifists. I can tell you for myself that, because you say we're not learning how to fight back. Even though I may not be planning to use military type weapons against the government, doesn't mean I'm a pacifist. And I don't, he just seems to be using the word pacifist in a broad sense. And he's wrong in, whether it's a narrow sense or a broad sense. I'm not a pacifist. I box, and I certainly will defend myself, defend my family. I certainly will use defensive force to defend myself and my family. So I'm not a pacifist. So if you are referring to me there, you're dead wrong, because I am not a pacifist. As far as fighting back, my physical ability to fight is not something that's going to help bring about a voluntary society. It's more than likely just going to wind up getting me killed. I'd like to think I'd get a few good shots in before they suicided me, but not an effective thing to do. Now, I mentioned briefly when I was talking at the top of the first hour, I think so. I was in the first hour. And I was talking about the Colorado Department of Revenue. I talk on the show all the time regarding fighting back, but that's with argument, not with not with guns and sticks and arrow, stuff like that. Now bombs. Oh yeah. Something like what, 12 bombs. So I wanted to make a joke about that the guy they arrested someone about, his name is Cesar Sayak. And I said, oh, you see, Q is right. Sayak, PSYOP. It's just all a false flag. PSYOP. They couldn't even change his name. PSYOP. Sayak. Yeah, okay. But I'll have to talk about that more on a different day. Yeah, PSYOP. See, I got the G And this particular G has flowers on it. So what does that mean? Is that a Mason that's just steeped in natural law with Aquinas? Is that? I don't know. But anyway, as far as the fighting back, what I recommend is being smart. We always defend ourselves in court. But as far as trying to make a stand and holding them accountable, if you are in Colorado, it's easy to just do a Google search and you can, or a search, duck, goose, or whatever. You can look up Colorado State Risk Management. You can actually get a form on their website to file a claim for damages caused by state employees, which is nice because you can't do that in California. You have to file a claim with the legislature if it's the state level. But if it's city or county, you can they have their risk management, like the city, Manhattan Beach, for example. So what we're going to do is initially I want to see if they can do something to get them to stop proceeding, because they're lying, and it's causing damage to someone I'm working with. So initially getting with risk management and letting them know that they are putting the state at risk that could cost them a significant amount of money. Well, it's significant to us, not necessarily to them. I know it's not their money, but that their job is risk management. It's basically a government insurance company. So we're able to now outline. I don't even need any testimony necessarily at this point. I have documentary proof that they are sending false statements through the mail in an effort to get this guy's money. Okay, they're looking for thousands of dollars under the guise of taxation, and they've made false statements that went through the United States mail as to separate him from that money, to justify. So they're lying. That is called mail fraud. That is a felony. At least false statements, well, 1001 on Title 18 is a federal, so I don't know if that necessarily applies, but the mail fraud does. But I'm sure they have an equivalent where it's a state felony. So this is something I recommend as a way to try to hold them accountable, is to hit their budget. Is it going to do anything if just one of us doesn't? No. It has to be a part of every proceeding. Every traffic ticket should result in an insurance claim. So he's saying something about defensive and not offensive. The thing is, you're saying that we're not fighting back. And I'm giving you an example where we are. That's just one example. Hell, I want to get a free stater on here and start petitioning, having them, file a bill to amend the New Hampshire Constitution to strip judges and prosecutors of their immunity. Oh. I'm looking forward to getting somebody on board for that, but we'll see what happens. Anyway, I am totally out of time. This will be on the LRN stream tomorrow. So, well, if you're hearing this, you already know. But anyway, it'll also be available tonight at markstevens.net. I want to thank everyone for tuning in for this episode on October 26, 2018. Live from the fortified compound in Mesa, Arizona. And we'll be live on Wednesday. So till then, everybody, salud.